Hi, I'm Tim Crane, and this is What is AUXCOMM? This is a recorded version of the presentation that was done on February 28th at the monthly GCARES training. And I appreciate you taking time to see exactly what's going on and how this can benefit you. So again, my name is Tim Crane. I am a professional emergency manager with the Michigan State Police Emergency Management and Homeland Security Division. My call sign is WM8A. I am an extra operator. I do hold a GMRS license and a GCARES license. I am a certified AUXC and a COML trainee and a planning section chief trainee. Trainee means that I have a task book open. And I will be the GCARES chairman and training officer. Why am I qualified for that position? In my day job, part of my day job, I teach ICS 300 and 400 to public safety. I am a contractor with the Michigan State Police, and then I contract with local organizations and state agencies such as the Michigan National Guard, the DNR, and do 300, 400 training, which is the advanced ICS classes for their first responders. And I do teach the 191 and G2300. That's EOC classes, and that's for emergency managers and folks that will work in an EOC. And then I also teach the 402 class. That is ICS for public and elected officials. And essentially, that's a course just kind of to scare them a little bit and make sure that they stay out of the command post and don't try to get in the way, if you will. I am an AUXC instructor, federally and state certified, and an ARRL field instructor teaching the EC 001 and 016 class. And then I do also teach the MySIMS, Michigan Critical Incident Management System class, which we'll talk about a little bit. And I intend on bringing these skills and this knowledge and apply this to helping Chris build a robust ARES AUXCOMM core in Genesee County. So what exactly is AUXCOMM? Many folks have heard this, and there's all kinds of things that's being said locally. And as anything that's new in the hobby, whether it be dropping code back in the 90s for the tech license or requiring basic ICS classes for a RACES card, anytime that there's a major change in the hobby, there is a host of folks that will tell you this is the absolute worst thing that's ever happened, and it's going to be the destruction of amateur radio, and it has to be stopped. And never fails, and that's we do see some of that going on now. So rather than dispel any rumors, I'm just going to explain to you exactly what AUXCOMM is, and we'll go through and explain some of the other programs and why this change was necessary. I want to take you back first to a time when life was simpler. Civil defense was the grandfather of modern emergency management that we have today. Some of this Grand Rapids one, you can see that poster actually at the state EOC in the library there. And that was from, I believe that was pre-World War II. This was really, really long time ago. And so you can see some of these, maybe some of you might even remember some of these or even participated that long ago, which is a wonderful thing. So I want to talk about Part 97. The amateur radio band is divided up into 3 segments. Now the word service, it's not the same as the word service in ARES, in the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. Not the same thing. The word service that they're using is like land mobile radio service or marine band service or aeronautical service. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about an actual radio service. So in Section 2, Part 2 of Section 3 defines that the amateur radio band is divided into 3 services: the amateur radio service, the amateur satellite service, and the radio amateur civil emergency service. Section 407, Part A, explains exactly what RACES is. And you'll see this word civil defense because it's that old. This was at a time really pre-World War II era when frequencies and spectrum were very, very expensive and very hard to come by. And the RACES service of the amateur band had a very specific purpose and a very specific definition, and that's outlined here in Section 407. You'll see that it says that you are a part of RACES if you register with a civil defense organization. Notice there's nothing in there about a RACES card. Okay, and we'll come back to that. But essentially, what you're saying is you're going to your emergency manager and saying, if you need me, me and my equipment are available for your use. That's essentially what that's saying. Section B goes on to talk about if in the event the president declares under Section 706 and Section 606 of the Communications Act that all amateurs need to be off the air. And there's this well-told proclamation that if that happens, then only RACES operators will be on the air. The interesting part is that there was Part 214 of Part 97 that was removed, and that segmented what bands were RACES bands. And so the assumption is now is that all of the band is open for RACES. And that is an assumption, and the FCC has not clarified that. The limit is that only RACES operators may talk to other RACES operators. There is some portion in the NTIA band, but it's extraordinarily limited. So I don't want to go over that right now, but that is the gist of it, is that only RACES operators may talk to other RACES operators for an actual RACES transmission. And then going into Section 4 of Part D, it says the limits that without a presidential declaration, drills and tests may not exceed a total time of 1 hour per week. And they can only be no more than 72 hours twice in any calendar year. This is extraordinarily limited. And the FCC, this has been a thorn in the FCC side because it's always been abused. It's never been well understood. And it's been a problem across the country for emergency managers in trying to discern what this is and how this helps them. And then to muddy up the waters even further, the FCC had a shot across the bow and said that the amateur service is not an emergency radio service, meaning all of Part 97 is not an emergency radio service. So how did we get here? Well, Tim, there's the RACES logo. So obviously RACES is an organization. It is not. There is no RACES expert that works at the Emergency Communication Division of CISA at the Department of Homeland Security. There is no RACES organization within Michigan. Now, I will say that there are some other states that have chosen to organize under RACES, and that is fine for them. And if that works for them, great. This has not worked in the state of Michigan, and that's why we have jettisoned this. So just to review, RACES is not recognized within ICS. It is extremely limited and widely misunderstood. There's no structure to know how many RACES card holders that we had. Previously, how this would work is the state police would generate the template. There would be a new template at every term of each new governor. That template would then be put out to all 83 counties, and each county would distribute those cards as they saw fit. The problem was that some counties might just have a handshake and a pat on the back, and then other counties required 6 prerequisites, a background check, and a pretty good frisking at the door. And beyond that, we had no idea from a state level how many RACES cards had been put out. So assuming that there ever would be a presidential declaration, there was no way to know which RACES card holders there really were out there. This was never intended to be an organization or group identity. A well-meaning ham, actually in Wayne County, back in the 60s, created that logo. It's a very cool logo. Nobody disputes that. And it became an organization, and it became a group identity. But there is no state or federal organization structure. And there's no defined role as to what is a RACES operator and what a RACES operator can or cannot do, aside from what's in Section 407 of Part 97, and that's extraordinarily limited. Before you ARES guys get thrilled with me, there's some limits to ARES as well. This is a creation of the ARRL. It is nationally recognized, so that logo is well known and well recognized, but it is not recognized within the incident command system. Now, we do have a statewide reporting structure in the state of Michigan, but that role is still pretty poorly defined. There is a manual, an emergency communications ARES manual, public service manual that the ARRL put out, and that was the last update was 2015. And there were folks from Michigan that did participate in that update, but it's still very poorly defined. There are MOUs, national MOUs with the Red Cross, the National Weather Service, Homeland Security, and Salvation Army, and that is extraordinarily useful for us. The requirements to be a part of ARES: be a valid amateur radio license, and you have to have a willingness to serve. That's it. Every licensed amateur, regardless of membership in the ARRL or any other local or national organization, is eligible to apply for membership in ARES. And that is straight out of the ARES manual on page 7. The problem with ARES is that this logo, which absolutely drives me crazy, it creates this complacency amongst the amateur radio operators that we can wait. Just sit around and wait until we get a phone call, and then we're going to come out. Well, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to come out and save the day. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we have our bands and our radios. Well, how are we going to talk to public safety? Well, when you start really probing down deep into that, there's a lot of questions that come out of it. And at the end of the day, there's not one county in the state that has the manpower and resources to back up their public safety communication system. We'll talk about that here in a second. Those same operators, though, they'll post things like this of being frustrated that they never get called out to help. So I think we can all agree that we have to do something different, or we're going to get the same response. Let's talk about the Michigan Public Safety Communication System for a second, how big the system is, and if there's any county in the state that can back this system up. How many radios do you think are on the MPSCS system? At the last update, there was over 123,000 radios on the system. How many pagers do you think? Last update, there was over 8,300 pagers on the system. How many agencies do you think are a part of that system? There is over 2,100 agencies. You think they might have a few towers? They have 304 tower sites all over the state. These are not small towers. Most of them are above 500 feet. There's one just down the road from me that's at 750 feet, and it is not a small tower. These are multi-million-dollar towers, and over $250 million has been put into this system. 93 dispatch centers are on the system, and 14 million PTTs a month are done on the MPSCS system. So let's be realistic here. There's just not any group in the state that can back up this system. And are we going to put a ham in each cop car and in every fire truck and ambulance? That's just not feasible, nor is it realistic. And if you really understand the system and how it works, that's totally unnecessary. The great John Imison, who is the original godfather of interoperable communications in the state of Michigan, he was the first COML, COMT, and AUXCOMM instructor. He says in every AUXCOMM class that if you wait for all else to fail, you will never be called out. And I absolutely, completely agree with that. ARPSC is the design and function of the ARRL. Dale Williams and some of his successors put a lot of time and effort in coming up with this agreement. Unfortunately, it was done back in 2007, and it has not been updated in a very, very long time. But it lays out, and it was an effort to try to get everybody to work in the same sandbox. Essentially, how this works is that the emergency communication specialist at EMHSD, at the Michigan State Police, works with the section emergency coordinator, and they, in turn, that Max is also the AUXCOMM coordinator. I want to show you this slide here, and this is the different type of incidents. Okay, type 5 is the most common. It's typically, a car accident, maybe a small structure fire, maybe a tier 1 medical, maybe just 6 response personnel, an ambulance, a couple cops, and maybe a fire department. And that's just, not even a full shift. We get into type 4, that's going to be a much larger structure fire. And we might have multiple agencies, multiple different fire departments that are all working together on that. And that might be more than just one shift. That might be, a good, a whole operational period, and we might have to cycle folks in and out. When we get into type 3, that's when it gets really interesting. And we're going to have multiple operational periods. You may see a declaration, an emergency declaration come out of an incident like that. Typically in Michigan, we don't have incidents that are bigger than type 3, but you will see typically a communication unit leader has been assigned to that incident, and that's when folks from the different communication providers would be called out and asked to assist. Type 2 and Type 1, everybody and their brother is going to be called out. Type 2 is a very, very large incident, and there's most likely going to be a presidential declaration, and we're probably going to be pulling resources from all over the country. And then Type 1, that's like a Deepwater Horizon level, and that we're going to see resources, manpower, and equipment brought in from all over the world. We're going to be asking for the State Department to ask some of our allies for oil booms and for specialized equipment that might not be normally accessible or available. So that's how that works. And we'll talk more about that as we get further into our GCARES training. But I just want to show folks that so they have an idea of what we're talking about here. So what would this look like, the actual incident command of a Type 3 incident or above? So now remember, ICS is modular, so we only open up the positions that we need. But typically, when we get to a full FLOP, which is our finance, logistics, planning, and operations, that's what you'll see there. And then you see a part of logistics. It's broken off into two different branches, service and support. Logistics is responsible, so we have a place to eat, we have a place to meet, we have medical if somebody gets hurt, we have communications, we have food, we have a place to go potty, we have a place to sleep if it's that big of an incident. Logistics is all about stuff and getting stuff so operations can function. Within service is the medical unit, the food unit, and there you see the communication unit. The COML is the leader, the unit leader of the COMU, and then they may have an incident communication manager that will be responsible for folks that would probably be in a communications command post, either mobile or a fixed point. And then they will have a radio operator and a message runner. We may even pull in a COMT, that's a communications technician, and they might set up gateways, satellites, anything of that nature, can program radios on the spot, can set up different resources that we have in Michigan. We have a communications on wheels, we have site on wheels, we have a Piglet that is just a site trunking repeater and or an 8-tack repeater, excuse me. And there's different assets and resources that are available all over the state. And the COMT would be somebody that would be setting those resources up. Previously, before we had AUXCOMM, we fell into this technical specialist role. There is not one COML in the state that has the time and ability to figure out who plays well with who gets along well with who has what training, and who has what resources. And the federal government saw this and said, we've got to bring these folks into the fold. They have to have more training as to how to operate within an incident command structure, but there's folks a part of these organizations that have enormous value and skills to bring to the table. And that's why the AUXC position was created. Also moving forward, this new position, the IT service unit leader, that's being created, and the AUXC could be moved over there as well. Very unique that the AUXC could be moved within different sections. This is the only position within the incident command unit that is all volunteer. So a very big deal in something that we've been waiting for a very long time in amateur radio public service. So these are all the different organizations that feed into the AUXCOMM position. Salvation Army Saturn, ARAS, of course, NTS, REACT, Mars, Civil Air Patrol, CERT, and even groups that still identify themselves as RACES. The AUXC position, it is an ICS position within the communications unit. So we now have an actual recognized position within the communication unit. Nationwide, we have a standardized training with a position task book. I want to be clear, that position task book is optional. It is optional. There's been all kinds of rumors that in order to go out and see a siren or participate in Skywarn, that you have to be certified. That's just nonsense. That's not true. Now we have a well-defined role, a very well-defined role with a very well-defined position, task book, and position description. This is now the standard in disaster planning and emergency management. This totally makes sense to them. It's in their language. And now there's no more of this eras versus races versus ARPSC, whatever that is. Trying to explain this to emergency management, and I train emergency managers. I know how this works. They don't have the bandwidth to figure this out. Okay? They're very, very busy people in a position that's a moving target that they've never fully can hit. So now we have a position where it makes sense to them, and it's very well liked. The prerequisites to become an AUXC are 20 hours of training. Typically, we do that on a weekend over 2 days, and this is taught by state and federal communication unit instructors, not just good old Bob the ham that's really excited about public service. These are folks that have gone through a rigorous training to become an instructor and have to have documented experience and the statewide interoperability coordinator to sign off for them to take the class. To get into the AUXC class, you have to have an endorsement from your emergency manager or your auxiliary communications manager. You've got to have a reputation of working well with others and being teachable. This is a very intense class. Only way you're going to get through the exercises is by working with other people in your groups and at your tables, and it's going to be difficult. There's incredibly challenging exercises. They're a lot of fun, but you will never sleep better than that night after training. It's a very intense class. We cram a lot over 2 days. You have to have a reputation of working well with others. You have to be willing and have a desire to work in an ICS environment under the direction of a COMML or ACM, or this just isn't going to work. And then you have to have the prerequisites of 100, 200, 700, and 800. These are the independent study FEMA classes. These are the basic incident command classes, and you have to have that to be able to get into the class. And then, after all, you've got to have an amateur radio license. This is the last RACES card that was produced, and thank you to Matt for loaning his when he had originally got his card back in 2020. Those were the classes he had. He now has multiple. I believe he has all of them now. So we did this card, and I participated in the structure of this and in that list of training, and we did this to try to get folks prepared for this statewide, that this was coming. We were going to do something new. And folks have got to be ready because we're going to be asking for more training. So this really shouldn't come as a shock. I get very frustrated when I hear operators tell me that they took their IS training 10, 15 years ago. Well, we're on a 4th iteration of 800. We're on the 3rd iteration of 100 and 200 and the 2nd of 700. So if you haven't kept up on those, that's very discouraging. What are the principles of AUXCOMM? Rather than going in and talking to our emergency manager and dumping out our Go Kit on their desk and saying, look at all the cool toys we have to play with, you need us. Those were the old days. The new days are we sit down with the emergency manager and say, what is it that you need? And let's see if there's something that we can help provide a capability for that need. And the goal is to provide value. Provide value. Not wait for the sky to fall. Okay? We want to provide value and create a monthly, even bi-weekly relationship with that emergency manager and provide value. Okay? We're there to serve the needs of the authority having jurisdiction, either the incident, event, or exercise. We're not there to serve the needs of organizations. Okay? We'll come back to that here in a second because it's very important. This is a team-based approach. We're going to work with all other groups and providers. We don't care if it's the Civil Air Patrol. We don't care if it's the Salvation Army. We don't care if it's the Red Cross. We don't care where you come from and what group you come from. If you're willing to train up to this level and play in the sandbox, we all have to work together. It's just that simple. And then our goal is to find true interoperable communication solutions. Okay? We cannot say I'm only a ham and I only want to talk on ham frequencies. Those days are gone, and we have to grow with the times. And there's multiple bands that the AUXCOMM has in their toolbox to work with, and all of these different bands have different pros and cons and can provide values in different ways. So that's our goal, is to provide true interoperable communications. At the end of the day, we need to focus on becoming a resource multiplier, not a resource drain. Too many ARES RACES groups would become a headache for emergency managers. And at some point in time, we've heard this many times, that they've said, well, we're just going to end our relationship with amateur radio because it's not worth it. I don't have the time to deal with it. And the focus needs to be on becoming a resource multiplier. Well, what do I mean by that? Anytime that we can go in and take up a task or project that would normally take someone from public safety to do it and free up public safety to do something else, we've become a resource multiplier. And that provides enormous value. AUXCOMM is organization neutral. Now, you see our GCARES logo there, and we're very proud of that logo. But if you serve as an AUXCOMM in Genesee County, you're no longer a part of GCARES. You're no longer a part of ARES. You are now an AUXCOMM. It's a very important point, because we cannot be reporting to multiple different people. We cannot be trying to promote different organizations or different resources. We have to work together. And that's what AUXCOMM is about. And that's why you see that organization neutral. It is not an organization. Very, very important concept to grasp. In Michigan, we've had over 160 volunteer communicators that have stepped up to take the training. 5 instructors we have statewide, and 9 have been AUXC trained in Genesee County. Well, Tim, I haven't heard anything about this. This is all new to me. I understand that. Those 9 that have been trained in Genesee County, unfortunately, did very little participation in Genesee County. And this is not to knock any previous group. This is not to throw anybody under the bus. But those 9 chose to take their volunteer skills and take it other places, in other counties, at the state EOC, within MICON at the National Weather Service. And that is a huge problem. There are counties that are begging us to come up and do a training for them. And then we've got a county that almost has 10, and they're not participating in Genesee County. That was a huge problem for the state, huge problem for Region 3, and a big problem for the county. And that's why some of these changes went into effect. What kind of services do AUXCOMMs provide? Well, we may do damage assessment. That's a big part of emergency management. The law states that you have to do your first damage assessment within 72 hours after an incident. And this is a service that we can provide and provide enormous value. Cache radio maintenance or management. There are multiple caches of 800 megahertz radios across the county that the county paid thousands and thousands of dollars for, and they might not be maintained. The battery might not be in good shape. The radio might not have been on in a very long time. The template might be outdated. There could be multiple issues with that, and a lot of different AUXCOMM cores throughout the state have gone in and said, let us know where your caches are. We'll go in, we'll make sure they're charged, we'll clean them, we'll dust them off, and we'll test them, and we'll do that for you. Does that provide value? You better believe it does. And it makes sure that our served agencies are prepared and ready if there's an activation. Multiple groups throughout the state are maintaining their county or local mobile command unit. They'll go in, fire up the generator, they'll turn on the laptops or the computers in there, turn on the monitors. There's something about Windows, even Chrome, Google Chrome, that anytime that there's a disaster or an emergency, that's when Windows needs to do an update. It never fails. Absolutely never fails. So these folks will go in, they'll turn everything on, they'll test the radios out, they'll do radio checks, they'll make sure that everything is operating, and that provides enormous value to their local agencies. MySIM support. Those that are trained in public safety to do MySIMS, the Michigan Critical Incident Management System, typically are busy doing other things. So this is a huge opportunity for us to provide value. The Michigan Critical Incident Management System is on a platform called WebEOC. About 24, 25 states use this platform, and we're the only state in the country that has specific boards that have been built just for AUXCOMM use. And we are very, very fortunate that we have that. And these boards, just incredibly useful for our purposes. And we can use them at public service events. We could use them for training, for incidents or full activations, and that can provide enormous value. But then if we stay sharp and if we really keep up on our MySIMS skills, that can provide enormous value in an EOC. Supporting other volunteer groups. There are a lot of other volunteer groups that might have radios, and they probably don't have the skill set to maintain those radios or even know how to properly use those radios. That is a great opportunity to serve our community by providing that training or helping them with their radio system, whether it be search and rescue, the sheriff reserve unit, or even a neighborhood watch. That's just a really good thing as a service to the community to help other groups maintain their radios and make sure that they have training for their people properly use those radios. Volunteer reception center management. There is a couple AUXCOMM-based volunteer groups in the state that they actually have a key to their location to go in and set up a volunteer reception center when they're called on. And they'll go in and take out a jetpack and get internet going. They'll get everything fired up. They'll get tables set up. They'll get chairs pulled out. And maybe not necessarily a communication task, but it does provide enormous value to the emergency management and their agencies that they serve. And it's just another way that we can, something else that we can do to provide value. It might seem odd to us, but there's a lot of folks in public safety that struggle getting onto a new network that they don't know, putting in a Wi-Fi password, connecting a printer. And every event that I've been on, whether it be a tornado or a search and rescue event, I've been asked multiple times to help with a printer, or to help someone, either a firefighter or police officer, to get on to the network. And that's something that we can definitely do, and that provides enormous value. Field observation. This is another example of something that we could do. This is an actual position within ICS that was created from wildland fire, but this is something that we could do rather than having a police officer or a fire truck sit and wait. Maybe a dam fails, or when a flood crests the road, or something of that nature. We could put an amateur radio operator on that scene, and that provides enormous value, and we're becoming a resource multiplier at the same time. So how this is going to work in Genesee County, some of you are saying, hey, Tim, I don't know if this is for me. And that's fine. I understand that this isn't for everyone, and that does not mean you still don't have a place. If you want to do Skywarn, if you want to do siren testing or come out to public service events, there is absolutely no reason why you can't still do that. And we need you to do that. And you have a place within this group. Max Schneider, the state AUXCOMM coordinator, regularly says that we're not building a country club. We're building a volunteer corps. Everybody has a skill that they bring to the table. And you decide which path you want to follow, and we will support that. So now, if you do want to serve in an EOC at a 911 dispatch center, a medical tent or shelter, or an incident or event command post, we are going to ask that you have an AUXCOMM card and you be AUXCOMM trained. Really, that's not any different than what the procedures were prior. It's just a different standard of training and a different card. Now, for those that are saying, well, we're not following Part 97, Section 407 of the RACES code, well, wait a second. It doesn't say anything about a RACES card. It just says you need to register with a civil defense agency. If you go to the emergency manager and say, I've taken the AUXCOMM class, I have this training, and I want to be called upon if you need me, guess what? You would still qualify as being a RACES operator under the guidelines of Section 407. So we don't need to really split hairs here and get crazy about what this is or isn't. I understand it's different. I understand it's different from what folks have done for 20, 30 years. I understand that. But this is not new. This is the state standard, and Genesee County is one of the last counties in the state to adopt this model. So what kind of training is GCARES going to provide? We're going to do training on ICS forms. If you ever participate at a public service event where public safety is calling the shots, if you will, we need to be speaking their language and using ICS forms. So you will see that, and we do need to train on that. WinLink is an enormously valuable tool, and that is now a nationwide standard, and we will be doing training on WinLink. EOC training, we're going to talk about what skills that someone that wants to be in an EOC would need to really provide value and become a resource multiplier. We talked a little bit about damage assessment. I have multiple after-action reports from real-world interop scenarios, and we're going to take that and apply that into exercises. See if we fall in the same traps and see if we can build upon and build up our skills to really work together as a team and come up with some really out-of-the-box solutions. Basic radio skills. If we've got a new operator that wants to get involved in public service, they have a place. And we're going to put an arm around them and make sure that we mentor and Elmer them up and they get basic radio skills training. And then also, as I talked about, that's an enormous value to provide to the community, to different volunteer corps at different public service events. That's something that we did at the triathlon for the event management staff. We gave them training on radios and provided them with radios. And that just gives unbelievable value and really cements ourselves as a group. And everybody at that event goes and tells their friends as to how useful these folks are and how good they are to have a part of your event. Go kits, we'll talk about that in fogs. If you've never seen the NIFOG, the MyFog, or the AUXFOG, the NIFOG and AUXFOG are nationwide frequency operating guides, and the MyFog is specific to the state. But there are multiple interoperability frequencies that we have access to that we can legally talk on and use, and we have in our toolbox. And those are denoted within all of those frequency operating guides. And we'll do training on that. We are going to do joint exercises with other groups. We did a workshop back in November, an ICS refresher, and then we did an exercise, and we had the ECs and ACM from Lapeer, Genesee, and Livingston and St. Clair all working together for the first time. Oddly enough, they had never worked together before in an exercise, and it was a very neat thing, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that. There's going to be other bands that you're going to see. There may be bands in modes that you've never heard about that you're going to see and get trained on. GCARES is a federal HF system that's used, and you can get trained on that as an amateur operator. It's in the NTIA band, so it's not within the purview of the FCC. And we can do things on that band because of that. We can encrypt, and there's a lot of things that we can do and really cool things that we can do with GCARES, and that is a system, a federal system that is for EOCs. We're also going to do training on MPSCS radios. Anytime that I've been on an activation anywhere in the state, I've been handed an MPSCS radio, and we have to know how to use that. If I didn't get the training that I needed, I would look kind of silly claiming to be a radio expert and then have a firefighter come up and say, I don't know how to get to this talk group. Can you help me? And thankfully, I was able to do that, and they look at you like you just discovered fire. So it, again, provides enormous value. On March 28th, we're going to have another training. We're going to talk about how disasters work in Michigan. We're going to go back to the basics, really talk about the process of what a Type 3 incident and above would look like, when we would be called out, and how that would work. And that will be a great training. Please come. Please, there's going to be some instructions on the exercise that we're going to do, so please keep an eye on that at gcares.org. And we'll talk more about that moving forward. So I want to make clear, this is not a country club. We're building a volunteer corps. And if you come and say, Tim, I want to participate in this, I don't know how and what my role would be, but I do want to have a place. We will find you a place. We welcome everyone. That being said, this is the direction of Genesee County. This is the direction of Region 3, in the direction of the state of Michigan. The train has left the station, so we're moving forward, and this is where we're going. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to one of us. You can email us at info@gcares.org, or you can email one of us directly, and we'll be more than happy to have a conversation with you and help you understand exactly what this is, exactly how this is going to work, and how we can find a place for you. If this isn't for you, though, I do ask that you please don't discourage other folks that may be interested in this. And make sure that if you're talking with people, getting information, it's folk that has actually taken the class and actually know what they're talking about. This has been a presentation from GCARES, and I am Tim WM8A. Thank you for taking 40 minutes out of your day to listen to what we have going on, and we look forward to seeing you at the next training. 73.